architecture, workflow, sitemaps, that entire the noise that exists there versus that. Yeah.
Right. So let's think through this. So when did sitemaps, when were they a big deal? When you're primarily talking about static content, like you have 5 or 6 pages, or you're saying, okay, I'm creating a homepage, it's going to have contact us, it'll have something about us, it'll have something, and there's a structure to that tree. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's essentially what is the how is the information related to each other?
Yeah.
Okay. And how are you presenting it to your users? So sitemap is primarily, it's more of a technical thing, is like what is the structure of the website and how is it going to be presented to the user? Right?
Okay.
Information architecture at a very high level, yeah, you do, you know, the, the maps or whatever, but I think a larger perspective behind that, the thought behind that is how do your customers think of the information? Okay. So, for example, if I say I want to book a ticket, okay, does book a ticket fall under manage my trip, or does it fall under, my profile,
Okay.
right? So, from a customer's perspective, what are they thinking? How do they think about that information? What is the structure? What is the natural grouping of that piece of information? That is what information architecture is.
Okay. So how different is information
Okay.
architecture from sitemap?
See, ideally, sitemap is a visual representation of how your site is laid out.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a flow chart.
Ideally, your sitemap will take into consideration the information architecture. Ideally, your workflows will take into consideration the information architecture, isn't it?
Okay. Okay.
Because if the user thinks about that information in a certain format, it says, okay, booking a ticket is the same as managing my trip. If the user thinks that, then it should be as a workflow, it should be a part of that workflow as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? So the information architecture is primarily talking about how are all these different pieces of information ordered? How do the people think about it? How do you make it easy to access? How do you make it intuitive, right? That's where the thought process is.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Sitemaps of a static content, where it's all static, you create a sitemap, it's purely static. Okay. However, when you think about today's applications, which are a lot more dynamic, interactive, and all that, you do workflows, and information architecture still feeds into that workflow, into your understanding of how you're going to create that workflow. Okay. So maybe somebody is booking a ticket, but as part of the booking the ticket experience, how would, if you ask the question, if you want to see the tickets you've already booked, what would you do? They might actually say, okay, I'm going back into the booking the ticket experience to see where my order is, isn't it? So
Yeah.
that is what it is. So workflows are designed for more dynamic kind of experiences, whereas sitemaps are more static, and information architecture feeds both of those.
It feeds more.
It feeds both of those, right? The
Okay.
knowledge of how the information is understood feeds how you create both workflows or sitemaps,
So the
depending on
reason
what kind of an application you're creating.
got it. So the reason I wanted to ask about this is because my understanding of workflows is pretty solid, and I kind of like the idea of workflows because we're talking about one particular linear experience, and even if that experience can be achieved through or three different ways, we focus on each of those ways independently. And
Mhm.
by doing that, you can sort of correlate and like consolidate and stuff like that. But I feel with information architecture, there's a high chance of overwhelmingness that can come into the mix.
Again, information architecture is not wrong. You have to do information architecture no matter what you're doing, right?
Okay,
But your argument is between a sitemap or a workflow,
that I understand. But my
right?
question was information architecture versus a workflow because I'm still not very clear on information architecture as a
So it's
concept.
like it's like you're comparing. Let me give you a different example, right? You're looking at, let's say, vegetable curry versus chicken curry,
Yeah.
okay, and salt. You're saying vegetable curry is different from salt. Yeah, it is. But salt is a part of vegetable curry. Salt is a part of chicken curry. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
I
the
do.
same way when you're looking at information architecture is an ingredient.
Okay,
Right? The sitemap and the workflow is what it leads to.
got it. Okay, okay,
Okay. But a sitemap, generally a workflow can do what a sitemap does, but a sitemap cannot do what a workflow does.
okay. So
Okay.
is it fair
So
to
I'll tell
assume?
you what. So when you did sitemaps in the past, you would just have a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Correct? Now, over time, what people have realized, if you have just a pure hierarchy, it doesn't work. You need to have links back. You have to have loops back.
Hmm.
Right? Now, how will you loop back? Okay. So earlier they used to say, correct, if you are doing a 5-page website, every page links to every other page. But is that logical? Is there a sequence in which? So that is where, workflow started coming in. They said, you have to think about how you lay out all your pages in the sequence of, steps that a user will take to complete a job. Okay. So you are planning about how all the links will be and how the overall process plays out. You understand?
Yeah.
That's why a workflow is a lot more comprehensive than as compared to a sitemap.
Got
And
it.
it can, and also workflows scale up to like thousands of pages, products with thousands of pages. Whereas
Hmm.
a sitemap, if I give you 1,000 pages, you'll probably, do 500 pages and then you'll look at me and give me a dirty look.
Yeah. So is it fair to assume that the information architecture is like the foundation, and then a workflow is sort of a deep dive into one experience?
Yes. Repeat it again.
I said, is it fair to assume that that a workflow is a deep dive of one particular experience in the information architecture? Like in information architecture, probably be a zoomed
No,
out.
information, it's a different concept altogether, Silvan.
Okay,
Information architecture is how information is organized.
okay, okay.
Okay. Workflow is how the experience flows.
Got it. Okay.
It's different. Okay.
Thanks, Prasad.
So an experience will flow in a logical way, and one of the logical ways is how people organize the information. That is also a logical component of it.
Got it. Got it.
Okay. Cool. Go ahead, Kavya. What was your question again? Could you remind me? Oh, yeah. Product management
Similarly.
and UX.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let's think through that part. Okay. So generally, when an organization sets up roles, okay, the question is, can a product manager do UX? Probably if they had the training and the ability. Right? Can a UX person do product management? Probably if they have the training and the ability. Right? Because I'm assuming anybody can be trained and if they have the natural interest and the ability, they will be able to do that job. Right? However, why do you have those as different job roles? Because the point is it's separation of concerns. Okay. There's one role whose only job is to think about the user experience. Right? Now you have a business person. Okay. And in India, the roles are a little bit, I'll tell you how it changes, but I'll tell you how it plays out in more mature organizations. And then, what you would see is a little bit of the immaturity that comes out of some of the companies that are out there in the Indian market. So, what does a product manager do? Okay. The product manager is basically trying to drive a business agenda. Okay. No company can survive without satisfying its customers as well as its business goals. Right. So you need individuals who are championing those different perspectives. Okay. And so that's what the UX role is championing the user perspective. The product manager is championing the business perspective. Right? It's a very simplistic level because even within product management, there's, in a more mature kind of an organization, you'll have business managers who will set the target. So the product manager is more of managing all the data, is managing, orchestrating activities between engineering, marketing, sales, design, business, all of these, they're orchestrating and trying to come up to a common understanding for everyone, and then driving the evolution of the product from that perspective. Okay. So in many ways, what you would think is a product manager is more of a generalist, and they're orchestrating all of these activities together. Right? Whereas when you think about a UX person, they're more of a specialist. They're a domain specialist. They understand their domain and they're bringing that knowledge to the table. Okay. Now, in a lot of organizations, I've seen product managers also wear the cap of the business. Okay. So they will directly be responsible for looking at P&L. They will have a P&L target and they are now driving that P&L target. Okay. And that is also a valid solution, but the P&L number comes from somebody in the business. They're giving it to the product manager because they're saying you understand this product and you understand all the different perspectives. Now drive the P&L. Okay. So the question is, for example, how would a UX designer and a product manager approach the same problem? That will help you understand the difference between them. Okay. When the UX guy is looking at it, they're basically saying, well, what are the problems? What are the challenges with a certain feature? Why are people not using it? How will they use it? They're basically trying to figure that component out. Okay. Or maybe the designer gets feedback that people are not using this feature, or the designer gets the feedback saying, hey, we need to increase revenue by 10%. And in order to increase revenue by 10%, we need to reduce the number of people who are dropping off by about 40%. That's the number. Okay. So now the designer is taking that number and trying to figure out how do I reduce the drop-offs by 40%. Okay. That is the specific problem they are solving. Now, what did the product manager do in that case? The product managers basically got a target at the beginning of the year saying you have to increase revenues by 30%, blanket number. You figure out what you're going to do. Now, what the product manager is doing is he's sitting down with the data folks and saying, okay, tell me what are the largest opportunities for increasing revenue? What are the biggest places where we are losing it? And so then he or she will have a list of 5 or 6 places where their opportunities are there. And they will pick up one opportunity and say, okay, by reducing the drop-offs, I can increase the revenue. So this is the initiative I'm going to drive, and this is how it's driving the profit. And then they hand it over to the design as a challenge. Right? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, so far.
Yeah. So when you think through it, both of these roles are doing separate things, but at the same time, they do have to overlap and talk to each other. Okay, so it's almost like I remember I talked to somebody who who was in the IRS, the Indian Revenue Services. Okay, and he was retired, and I sat down and I talked to him, and he, and as I was talking clearly, the other person figured out I didn't know what I was talking about. So they said, wait, let me clarify your perceptions about what an IRS person does. Okay, we are administrators, we are not accountants. Okay, that's a huge difference. You see the point? So this guy is managing a bunch of accountants. That's the same way a product manager is an administrator, not a domain specialist. That's what you need to think through.
If I can add to that, I think when you think about career progression in UX, a lot of times product management seems like the natural path, but as you've just explained, it's not necessarily the same, or not necessarily the most natural progression of UX. You have probably to learn a few more skills and stuff. So do you think it's where UX designers would head?
See, I think that natural progression thought process usually is pretty much, I've seen that in India. I haven't seen it anywhere else. Okay. And the reason I see that in India is the product manager controls a lot of the things that are going on. So for most designers, they kind of feel like if I need to make decisions, if I need to have a say in the organization, I need to become a product manager. Right? And so that is the general perception, and that perception drives the thought process that yes, the product manager. But if you want to be a product manager, why even be a designer? Think through it. You know, train to be a product manager. You're wasting time by being a designer because that's a lot of knowledge that you've gained. I mean, I'm not saying it's probably not a waste of time, but it's still, I mean, if you want to get to the top of your profession, it's unnecessary time doing something that is not critical to what you want to do. Right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, but this might be because I haven't worked in larger companies. So I'm wondering, like, if you're a designer and from senior designer, you go to a lead project manager, and then because there's very few places where you have a chief design officer or something. Where do designers go in typical organizations, I suppose?
So traditionally, designers, the progression for designers is you're a designer, an individual contributor. Then you become a lead where you're functionally leading other designers. Okay. Then you have a bifurcation, at which point you can go into a principal role or you can go into a managerial role. Okay. The principal path is you continue to specialize within your discipline and you are the best at what you do. Okay. And you're managing people functionally. You're not managing people on a day-to-day basis. Okay. You're managing them to get a job done. Whereas the manager is a people manager. So they are basically, it's a very different role altogether, which is you have to understand how you work with people and all that, and then you go down that path. Okay. Now, within design also, there are three levels of abstraction. So as you get more and more senior, your role abstraction style changes. At the first level, you're managing process. Okay. At the second level, you're managing people. And then at the higher level, which is chief design officer or chief experience officer, you're managing the environment. Okay. So when you say managing the environment, well, managing environment is, well, how do you hire people? How do you fire people? How do you promote people? So these are all the infrastructures that actually actively engage or disengage your team members, isn't it? When you set those processes, now you've created an environment where designers are achieving their potential or not achieving their potential. So that is what at the VP level or a senior director level, you're managing environments. Okay. So that is how, when you're specializing in design, it works that way. Okay. Now, there will be a few folks who are very entrepreneurial and stuff like that, right? So then they might actually end up taking on the chief experience officer role, which is a company-wide kind of a role where you're defining, like, how do people experience every touch point of your organization, all the way from, how you would do, let's say, customer service, all the way to, how you organize flowers in somebody's room or whatever. Everything is a touch point. Right? And interestingly, Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the top 3 hospital systems in the world, has a chief experience officer. And what is interesting is I went for a surgery there, and the anesthesiologist said, "You want mango?" Or I got mango, and she gave me 3 or 4 different, flavors. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Oh, when you get the anesthesia, I'm going to put that flavor in there, so that's the last thing you will smell before you fall asleep." I'm like, "Wow, that's experience." Right? So again, within the Indian context, I think your question is also a lot more tactical, like, where do I see my career move? And my argument to you is, I think India is a maturing market. Right? When we set up 10 years ago in India, people didn't even know what UX was. People would ask me questions like, UX mein naukri milta hai kya karke? You know? But today, and then after that, the next group of people that came was, jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai. So if I know visual design, I'm a UX designer. Okay. Today, the argument is around, with the whole discussion is around interaction design. People talk about interaction design. So I see that the maturity within the Indian market is growing very, very rapidly. Okay. Even the job description that I see is maturing very, very rapidly because companies are starting to invest in that. So my argument to that is, I think, if you are excited about UX and you want to stay in UX, get really good at what you do, understand the domain, work with strong people, within your office where you can learn from, right? And I would say you would be one of those first crop of leaders when that opportunity opens up, right? And that day is not far away.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Go ahead, Achyut.
So I have two questions. One is with regards to the information architecture thing that Simran has raised, and one with the product management thing. First thing, so when we talk about information architecture and workflows, right? So if information architecture can be considered as the salt, then I got to keep it ready before I start cooking either a veg curry or a non-veg curry.
Correct.
Do you see there is a probability of information architecture changing as we do the workflows?
See, when you think about how I teach workflows,
Right.
okay, what do I teach you, right? I ask you to think about experiences, scenarios,
Right.
use cases,
Context. Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you're doing all that, you are automatically figuring out the information architecture.
Right. So it's embedded within that.
It is embedded. It is embedded within the process.
All right.
Okay. So when you start thinking about, well, what are the tasks? When I say define the scenarios and prioritize them, okay, what you're thinking about, what are the tasks that people need to achieve? Okay. What is success for that task? And what is the sequence of steps that they need to take to achieve that task?
To succeed. Yeah.
So inherently, all of that stuff is related.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
And then when you start doing multiple workflows, you start realizing, remember, have I taught you when I teach you guys workflows, do I teach you numbering?
Not. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, Prasad.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
one of the reasons why I teach you numbering is if something is 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you know all of those are related, isn't it?
Sequential flow. Yeah.
It's not even sequential. In one workflow, you have 1.1. In another workflow, you have 1.2. In a third workflow, you have 1.3.
Okay. Okay.
So 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, they're all related.
Correct.
So information architecture is baked into that.
Right. In the numbering.
Yes.
So yes,
And
sir.
so for you guys, that's why I don't teach information architecture as a completely different topic. It is baked in and you have to think about it.
Understood. Understood, sir. So my second question was on this thing that you have expressed, and I also heard it from a lot of industry leaders that going ahead with the intervention of AI, they are more looking at lean teams going ahead. So do you see kind of a more merger of product management and UX? Because, sir, I also got to know that these days product managers are being trained on empathizing with users also.
It's not these days.
Oh, okay.
Okay. They've been doing it for a long time. In fact, what is ironic is I was doing this today. In fact, I was going to talk about heuristics. Let me talk about that. And then I'll tell you what is interesting. Well, let's actually go through what I want to talk about today. There are at least 3 or 4 myths I want to go over. And one of them, when I talk about heuristics, remind me what is the difference between product managers and designers? Because there's a very subtle difference, but you'll understand it when you see it. So, Nirav, do you want to go through the presentation?
Yes.
So the first question, and I've been collecting questions over a couple of weeks, and I keep talking about the F pattern and how that's not real, but I keep getting those questions again and again. And I want to make sure that everybody understands. So I've taken some time to put together my thoughts into a slide, into a deck. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run through what the F pattern means. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. So this is what the F pattern is. Most people basically, Nielsen Norman came out with this in 2006, and they said there is an F pattern. Okay. And what an F pattern looks like is you look at the red, there is like these. So the first line is long, the second line is slightly shorter, and then, it gets smaller and smaller, but then they're aligned to the left. So that's why they say there's an F pattern. Okay. Now, if you read all the the social media posts that are out there, you will think like F pattern is like the thing. It is the big deal that is F pattern. Okay. But let's go on to the next slide. Okay. So then in 2006, somebody said, wait a minute, it's not an F pattern. It's a triangle pattern. Okay. Now, okay, there's a triangle because you can see that, doesn't matter how many pages it happens. Then if you go to the next slide, okay, then iQuant basically came out and they said, wait a minute, there's not F pattern, but you have like so many other patterns, right? So that we don't believe there's an F pattern. Okay. Now you come on to the next slide. Okay. This is literally like looking at the sky and seeing animals and people and bulls and all that stuff. Right? If you don't understand, it's like if you don't understand astronomy and you're saying there's a bull in the sky, okay, there is a common language. Multiple people know when I say look at the bull, everybody knows where to look in the sky. Okay. To that point, vocabulary is good. But beyond that is that advancing your knowledge of the science. Okay. And that is where the problem is. Okay. If you are not a designer and you're saying, okay, there's an F pattern, okay, I get it. But if you're a designer and you talk like, there is a bull in the sky or whatever, would you respect that guy as an astronomer? Isn't it? So that is the whole point with the F pattern. Now, interestingly enough, let's go on to the next slide. Nielsen Norman comes back and says, wait a minute, there's an F pattern, there's a layer cake pattern, there's a sequential pattern, there's a pinball pattern. Now they came up with 50 other patterns. Now, which pattern? But if you look at the internet and nobody read all these 50 other patterns, right? All they're saying is, okay, there is an F pattern. Everybody that posts on LinkedIn there's an F pattern. They'll create a 5-page PDF document about the F pattern. Okay. When Nielsen Norman, the original guy that did it, is basically coming back saying that is not the thing, there are 20 other things. But ultimately, all of these, if you stop to think about it, let's go back to the previous slide, Nirav. I want you to think about why do you get these patterns? Okay. Go back. Okay. Back, Nirav. Up. One more. Yeah. Why do you get these patterns? Why are there these different shapes? Okay. The different shapes are there because of the content underlying it. Isn't it? If you put an image underneath, what do you see? The bottom right-hand corner, if you put an image there, what you see is you see one concentrated dot. Okay. If you put text somewhere, what do you see? You see a left to right reading pattern. Okay. You put 20 lines one on top of each other. What happens? People's attention span reduces. So the first line will get the most amount of attention span. The last line will get the least amount of attention span. Okay. That is the science behind it. So as a designer, when you're thinking about when somebody comes to you and says F pattern, Z pattern, layer cake pattern, and I promise you, give it another 6 months, some genius influencer will come in and they will say, okay, now there is a layer cake pattern, this pattern, that pattern, hundreds of patterns, and they'll create decks on that. Okay. But ultimately, as a designer, the thing that you have to understand, let's go down to the next slide. Next slide. One more slide. Yeah. The thing you have to understand is the topology of the page, the information that is placed on the page defines how people scan it. Right? The people's motivation also defines how people scan it. If you're really motivated, okay, let's say you're doing like a academic search, you have to find a paper, you're very, very motivated. You will read every line of that paper until you find what you're looking for. Okay. If you're not motivated, you might just read the first, second, third line and then move on. Okay. So your motivation and the layout of the page defines how you're going to scan that page. Okay. Second, If you look at Japanese, they have Japanese websites are top to bottom as well as left to right. Okay. So again, based on the layout of the information, the scanning will change. Okay. Or if you look at Arabic, it is right to left. So again, scanning changes. Okay. But overall, as a designer, F pattern is a very dangerous overgeneralization. And it is just a way to kind of keep yourself stupid. Okay. Because when you say there's an F pattern, I've solved the mysteries of the universe, then you're not going to really investigate why are stars formed, which star is what, why are stars different colors. There's so much science out there to learn. And so don't stay with the generalizations is what my perspective is. So everybody understand this whole component of F patterns and Z patterns and all that. Okay. And what is most ironic is Nielsen-Norman group, the one that came up with it, they themselves have said there are many. Now, if you think about Nielsen-Norman group, why do they do what they do? Because they are a design studio as well. Right? They don't market to design leaders. They market to business leaders. So if I want to talk to a business leader and I want to say, listen, you need to invest like $1 million in your design and you need to hire me to solve your problem, I'm going to obviously create all these specific special marketing terminologies that the business leaders will get. Oh, there's an F pattern, there's a Z pattern, and therefore you have to do this. That's why, okay, the business guy gets it. Okay, so all of these are terminologies that have been created to create opportunities for marketing, not for training designers to be better designers. Okay, cool, awesome. Let's go on to the next one. So everybody says there are 10 heuristics. Okay, and this is again Jacob Nielsen's 10 heuristics. Okay. Fact of the matter is there are 90 plus heuristics. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so these are all different heuristics and there are about 10 different frameworks. Okay, so there's a Nielsen's framework. Nielsen's heuristics is one framework. Okay, there's another one. How many of you have heard of the SUS framework, SUS? Yeah, there's a system usability scale framework. Okay, that is designed for creating metrics. Okay, then there are multiple other frameworks. Depending on why you are optimizing your experience, your frameworks change. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so there are about 91 different rules, 10 frameworks. Let's go to the next one. And this is where the product manager and the designer game changes. Okay, guess what framework the designers are taught? Designers are taught the Nielsen-Norman framework. Okay, because that is the easiest to teach, that's the easiest to learn, and then that's the easiest to go show that you are smart. Okay, so that is the one framework that is taught to designers, and designers are like, awesome, I know design, I know this framework, I can teach it. Okay, now to Achyut's point, when a product manager is learning, they also learn heuristics. Guess what framework they are taught? And this fundamentally explains the difference. Go back so they can see all the different frameworks. Guess which framework they're taught here.
Sir, is it ISO 9241 ergonomics of human?
No.
Diagrams.
Those are ergonomic. That's the ergonomic industrial design guys kind of get that.
Dieter's Rams 10 principles. Good design.
It is a system usability scale.
Okay.
Because the SUS scores are metrics that a product owner can improve. They are measurable metrics. You can't take Nielsen scores and create a measurable metric until you think about it, right? which is why when I teach you guys heuristics, I don't just teach you heuristics. I teach you how to prioritize, how to rank, how to do the severity, because you have to have a conversation with your sorry. Sorry, because you have to have a conversation with your product teams. You need to have a prioritization. You need to have a severity. You need to have a business discussion, right? Now, when you're a product manager, you're learning from a business perspective, right? So you have to be able to measure it. You have to be able to improve it. That is why they're fundamentally introduced to the SUS course. Okay. So as you get more senior as a designer, okay, you want to be learning as many frameworks as you can, so you can talk to each of those frameworks is designed to talk to different problems, different people within your organization. Okay, it's a different language. When you learn these different languages, you can talk to people within your team at their level. Okay, if you simply know just one Jacob Nielsen's thing, you only know one language, and the other guy knows German, you know English. Good luck having a great conversation. So does this answer your questions about heuristics and why, how you approach heuristics is important within your organization? Kavya, does that give you a little bit more clarity between product managers and UX guys?
Little, yes.
All right, cool. Let's go on to the next one. And there's a link, there's a nice, beautiful article. If somebody can post it here, I think, I would suggest that you read up on it and, just get familiar with it and just be curious, right? If every once a week you read one of those frameworks and you try to understand what is it good for, what is it not good for, how do you use it, how do you implement it, I think you become so much smarter. And it's like, it's a 10-week challenge if you want to do this as a group. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So this is one of those things where it says, okay, research takes a long, long time. Okay. Now, the thing that I would actually point to you when you're talking about research. Okay. Research takes time. However, there are ways that you can make it faster. That's one data point. The second data point is historically, if you are starting off, I mean, this is a simple, I was watching this one YouTube video where this guy says, I'm doing graphic design. I'm creating a logo for you. Okay. And I'm going to spend 5 hours to create a logo for you that you will like. Okay. What is a fair amount? It's about $500. So, no, but I actually charge about $5,000. Okay. This is why you're only spending 5 hours of your life. Why should I pay you $5,000 for 5 hours? He says, see, okay, what if you hired somebody, okay, and they spend 50 hours trying to design the logo for you? Would you pay them more? Actually, no, I wouldn't pay them because it is their problem. They need to be more efficient. Okay. So you're saying that efficiency is what you pay for. So if I'm more efficient, I'm getting paid. So that is fundamentally the concept of most people that get into design. Okay. The first thing they try to do is, okay, for everything they want to do research. They don't stop to think about what is their knowledge that's already existing. Okay. What data do I already have? Okay. Instead of that, they just want to do research on everything. Or they will start designing things that you know are blatantly wrong if you spend the time reading it. Okay. They design these components and put it up there and you say, why did you design that component? Oh, when I do the research, I'll figure out it is wrong. No, you're wasting time. Should you be paid for that time that you wasted? Actually, no, right? You should be paid for your efficiency. So the fundamental aspect is, number one, as designers, you need to be aware of existing research, right? Once you're aware of existing research, there are techniques that can help you speed up and rapidly prototype and rapidly test. Okay. And when you're rapidly testing, the core skill that you need to learn there is take a problem and break it down. So for example, okay, if somebody comes to you with a business idea, okay, and you don't know, and you are a venture capitalist and you want to invest in that idea. Okay. And you need to do some kind of research to figure out whether that product will succeed or not. How will you do research? So the important thing there is you have to be able to break down the problem. So there are two problems in there. The first problem is there a need for this? Okay. Okay. If there is a need, then how much are people willing to pay? Okay. Because you're looking at it from a business perspective. So if there is a need, but people are not willing to pay more than 1 rupee, you're not going to have profitability. Okay. If there is a need and maybe not a rupee, but people are willing to pay like 5,000 bucks. Okay. And your cost of delivering it is just about a rupee. Yeah. You have an opportunity there. Right. So now that you've broken it down into these smaller questions, you can now run experiments. So the way you run faster experiment, take the larger problem, break it into smaller problems. Okay. And experiment with each one of those smaller problems until you get the answer. Okay. And small problems are easier and faster to figure out. Okay. Now, I would encourage you to kind of look up this Tom Chica, he's got a TEDx video on how he experimented for Google Glasses. Okay. It's a really great way. Like, he took like a week and $300 to figure out how to design with Google Glasses. Okay. Very super smart guy, really good at experimentation. Okay. And then we can have a conversation if you still have questions. But my point is, know your research, existing research, learn how to break a big problem into smaller problems, and then learn how to create experiments for those smaller problems that are very cheap and very fast, and you'll be able to get your answers much faster. Okay, cool. Any questions or thoughts at this point? Let's go on to the next one. Yep, let's go to the next one. Okay. Now, here's one other aspect. Okay. The question is, does research help an organization? Absolutely. This is something, in fact, one of my colleagues is a professor at a university, and one of the classes she teaches is when UX designers are wrong. Okay. And this is a design class. She teaches designers. Okay. And what she does is basically she says, see, the process for UX designers is designed to do the best UX possible. Okay. But the company is responsible for making money. Okay. If it is not making money, then the UX designer is not getting a salary. Okay. So sometimes your business goals may be at opposition with your UX recommendations. So she does this class on when good UX recommendations should be rejected. Okay. So from the same perspective, when you think about research, the more research you do, the better it is for the organization. Okay. But to get perfect information, you need infinite amount of time. Okay. But the market moves very, very fast. So by the time you get all the research, maybe the market has already moved. Maybe your product has already become redundant. Maybe a new product has come into the market. Okay. So the point is, as a designer, we always need to think about how am I going to be relevant to my organization? How do I keep, maybe not to my, but how do I keep my organization and my product relevant while trying to get as much information as I can? So the trick is as much information as I can, that is within the constraints that I have, right? So research, good research is always done within constraints, business constraints, time constraints, money constraints. And so if you can figure out how you can work within those constraints, that is when you become super successful. Okay. Most designers who complain about, okay, there is no time for research, these are folks that don't understand the constraints. And when they're not accountable to the constraints, no business is going to respect you. Okay. So this is one of those things that I want you to understand. Okay. So at all points, try to figure out what is the simplest and the fastest way and what is the most important. You might have 10 questions. What is the number one question that you need to answer? Then what is the second question? Learn to prioritize. If you're able to do that, you become really impactful within the organization. You may not be able to get 100% of the research, but you're still very, very relevant to the organization. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is one of those things that I was thinking is like if you want to validate, the faster ways are low fidelity prototyping, which is just paper, pen, writing it out, or even just observing. Focus groups, I'm not a big fan of focus groups, but I put it in there because other people kind of like it, but that's fine. Maybe that's just because I'm not a focus group kind of guy. Then there are websites that do concept testings, and then you can also do direct sales. In fact, some of the best research that I've seen is the founders are on the phone with their customers and talking to them every day for the first 500 days of their company. Okay. And as these customers talk every day, the founders talk, they're taking that research and incorporating it into their product. Okay. So that is one of those things where you can validate your idea very, very quickly. Second, usability testing. There's also A/B testing, card sorting, remote testing. Remote testing, in fact, can get you the results in a matter of 1 or 2 days instead of weeks altogether. Okay. And then you can also do competitor analysis. These are things that you can do within all of these things, with the exception of probably A/B testing and focus groups. You could probably execute in under 1 week. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next one. All right. So this is one which, again, I see this and I know our guys generally don't feel this, but I really want you to get this, which is, people believe that AI is somehow going to make you, just learning ChatGPT and Midjourney is going to make you an AI-enabled designer. It is not, right? Knowing tools, like if I know how to use a hammer, it doesn't mean I'm a carpenter, right? It just means I know how to use a hammer. Okay. The same way, if you know ChatGPT, Midjourney, or something else, does not make you an AI-enabled designer. So what an AI-enabled designer does, in fact, if you go to the next slide, okay, that is where, the how to prepare part, right? It is about thinking when you should integrate AI into your workflows, right? How should you integrate it? When should you not integrate it, right? Those are the kinds of questions that you need to think about, right? The next thing that you need to think about is, well, how am I connecting my usage of AI to the business goals? Okay, so this is where the AI may not be able to understand the business goals. It may give you design solutions, but you are now thinking about the business goals and connecting both of this. What did the AI give me? What is the business goal? Will it satisfy or not? Right? Now, did I ask the right question of the AI? Because the AI will give you an answer for what you've asked of it. But was that the right question? So the question is not like, like when you do A/B testing, AI can give you 10 different solutions, but is that solution the best solution? No, out of the 10 solutions, it may be the best. But is that the best solution in the whole solutions? It may be not. So that's what you should be thinking. Is there some other question I should be asking? Is there some other way I should be approaching the problem? Is there some other audience I should be thinking about? Is there some other way I can build a business case, right? If you can answer those kinds of questions, then you become even more powerful because AI simplifies the execution, but not that thought process, right? And finally, it's also thinking through about how do you tell stories, right? How do you get organizational buy-in for the solutions that you have? AI cannot do that for you. You have to think it through and kind of create that logical story and that logical way of selling it to the organization, right? How do I have people who support me? And then how do I get people to kind of believe that this is the next investment? So those are things that only you can do. Okay. So if AI is solving part of your work, then you're free to do all of these other things. Okay. Which kind of comes to Achyut's question is, yes, teams are going to get smaller, right? Because companies expect you to be more productive. But productive not in terms of the work that the AI is doing, but productive in terms of orchestrating, thinking through the goals, creating much more impact within the organization. That is where the productivity is going to be expected of you as a designer. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next one. I think there are 1 or 2 more points there. No, that's it. Cool. So that's it from my perspective in terms of the questions that I wanted to cover. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions and comments at this point. We can stop sharing, Neerav.
Thank you, Prasad. That was very insightful.
Now the jackass in me will say, of course. Yeah. But I mean, one of the interesting things is, again, coming back to the product manager and UX, I think that was a really cool question for today, is these roles are all going to overlap, right? Now, a product manager also does, they have a terminology called UAT. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it. It's called user acceptance testing. We call it usability testing. They call it UAT. Okay. The irony of it is the underlying principles are all the same. Okay. But what has happened for the longest time is because design was not as mature within this ecosystem, and India is primarily an engineering ecosystem. Okay. Product managers had to learn all of this. Oh, you have to get your product approved. You have to get user acceptance testing. You have to do all that. So it ended up being part of their curriculum. Okay. But practically speaking, will a product manager be able to do all of that stuff? Not really. They cannot do it because they cannot manage the business. They cannot orchestrate while at the same time doing user acceptance testing. They can't do all that. They physically cannot do it. Okay. Even if they have the knowledge, you physically cannot do it because you only have 8 hours a day. So they will have to delegate it to someone. Somebody else within their team will have to be the domain expert on that area. Right? So yes, so to a large extent, there are overlaps. The product manager is expected to know a lot more than just simply, managing the timelines of a product. But at the end of the day, there are experts that also do their stuff. Go ahead, Simran.
So you mentioned that India is a engineering first country, right? Engineering
Mhm.
minds. Is there any country in your experience that is design first so far?
Japan.
Japan is design only. They first start with design and then go ahead with it.
Yeah, but it's an irony. The irony of it is the digital experiences are not designed first.
Okay.
Right? But when you look at the way they do their spaces, service design, or the space
Yeah,
design,
yeah.
interior design, they're amazingly design-centric culture.
But why isn't that got into the digital space? Theoretically, at
Mm,
least.
Many reasons. I think when you go land in Japan, in fact, this is the first thing I got. When we were kids, we used to say Japan is so advanced, it is like the cutting edge, blah, blah, blah. And then you land into a Japanese airport and you still see the 1980s huge CRTs, huge
Mm.
CRTs. Okay. And you're looking at the airport and you're thinking, like, what happened? Japan essentially stagnated in the 1980s and 90s. Their economy stagnated. It stopped growing.
Mm.
Okay. Then their population stagnated. So as a consequence, they have a lot of socio-economic problems. And as a result, they did not necessarily get on the digital bandwagon like the US or India did. Okay. So, but if you look at some of the companies, Rakuten and all that, Rakuten, in fact, is one of the largest recruiters of talent, global talent. And they bring everybody to Tokyo to work in their headquarters. Okay. And their working language is English. Whether you're Japanese, Chinese, doesn't matter. You're all speaking English. Okay. And you can see the culture because Rakuten is now a global company. They realize that and they're building design and all that. They're doing a lot of that stuff into it. So at the end of the day, I would say, there's some countries that are culturally very design centric inherently.
Okay.
Okay. But it's just that, maybe they didn't succeed or they didn't get a foot into that type of business, the digital business, or they didn't wet their feet long enough for them to kind of say, this is how I'm
Yeah.
going to drive this design into it. But even if you look at the industrial design that comes out of Japan, is phenomenal,
Exactly.
right? Yep. Go ahead, Bhaskar.
So, summarizing, there was a last slide which says there are three different components that we need to be familiar with to drive value of UX, like relating business outcomes to this. That certainly adds a certain component or our time to cater to that.
Right.
And how should we actually systematically plan around it? Because if someone who is currently managing or something would be like, why are you doing this stuff? Because it's outside what we want, but we know that it is coming forward. So planning it and justifying it are two components that is still like.
See, the point, it's a very interesting perspective. Which is people will have certain expectations from you. So, like what I say is the classic thing is how do you hold teams accountable? Okay. I tell most designers you should write minutes of meetings. Okay. Now, the feedback I get is bimodal. There'll be one group of people that say everybody in my team got mad at me. They gave me warnings not to do this kind of activities anymore, and they're like planning to kick me out of the company. Okay. Then the second kind of feedback I get is, oh wow, they love me and I just got promoted and I started growing in the organization. Right? Understand the politics of what happens within an organization. Okay. If you've been working in that organization for a long time, you haven't been doing anything. Now, all of a sudden, you start writing minutes of meeting and jumping around, you start getting noticed. Guess what happens? People start wondering, why are you doing what you're doing? Right? Are you trying to make the other person look stupid? Are you trying to get promoted? What is happening? So people put on their political hats and they start wondering, what is it that you're up to? And they start getting insecure. And that creates the friction. Whereas if you just join the company and right off the bat, you start writing minutes of meeting and stuff like that, they say, this is your style of working. They don't attribute anything because you're the new guy. You are not a threat to anybody anyways. Isn't it? So the same way is when you are working within organizations, a lot of it is trying to figure out, like if you are an existing member of the team, what should your strategy be to grow in the team? Versus if you're a new person in the organization, what should your strategy be? There's a different game that you have to play there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I've been planning it. I mean, how to deal with it, it's there, but still planning, we have to do it under the lines just to show that until and unless we can show that outcome that is being achieved.
Yeah, exactly. So here's a very interesting scenario. Okay. My first job, I was not very successful at my first job. Right. To the point that I was put on a performance improvement plan. Okay. And the reason was, before I got hired, I had got a patent for my master's thesis. I was funded by my university to do some really cool work. And, that was when, the technique, the search assistance feature, that's what I'd done for my master's thesis. And that's when the .com bubble exploded. But of course, I was feeling very arrogant. So the first company that I joined, the first project that I was on, I would tell people all the ways that they were wrong. You are doing this wrong. You are doing this wrong. This is how it should be. This is how it should be. I was telling people all the things that they were doing wrong. Guess what happened? People don't appreciate it. Right? Because they're saying, we've been doing this for a year longer than you have. You just came yesterday and you're telling me all the stuff I'm doing wrong. So this guy talks a lot, doesn't do anything. Okay. Promptly, I was put on a performance improvement plan. Right. Now, I've already lost a lot of credibility within the organization. What do I do now? So they said, okay, we don't want to work. We don't want him in our project. We're going to move him to a different project. Okay. I moved to a different project. Right. In the other project also, I knew there were things that they were doing wrong. And I also kind of figured I had some counseling and the people told me like, dude, you talk too much. You calm down for a bit. Okay. Is it okay? So I know apparently I haven't learned my lesson yet based on all the smiles that I'm getting from all of you. So what I did was in the next one, they asked me, do this. I said, okay. I knew it was wrong. I said, okay, give me 2 days. I'll take care of it. Okay. Went back. I did what they did. And then I did what I thought was right. Because the key feedback that they gave me was, okay, this guy talks, he doesn't do. So I said, I'm going to do the other solution as well. I went in and I said, yeah, you told me to do this. I did this. But then I noticed there's this problem and this problem and this problem. That is why I did this. And so this is my idea. But if you want, we can use whatever you want anyways. So there was no threat to that. Oh, we like your idea. Carry on with your idea. I did that 3 or 4 times. Automatically, I built credibility within this team. And I got a team contribution award the second time around. Right? So the point being is you have to understand when you're in an organization to get that organizational buy-in, you have to understand how that organization is thinking, right? And where you are at that point in your career, and then how you play that accordingly. If you try to do too much in one shot, you don't want people to get mad at you.
Yes.
Cool. Go ahead, Achyut.
Sir, I guess part of my question has been answered at the last bit, but then I anyway will ask, sir, how do we balance between having a sense of humility and still standing up for what we think is right at how do we balance this political kind of a thing?
It's not that. It's an internal mindset issue. It's like if the general, one of the common statement that people say is, if you talk to a surgeon or you talk to a lawyer, they're generally a-holes.
Right.
Okay. Why is that? Because if you're a surgeon and you're in the when you're doing the surgery, you hold a scalpel in your hand. She can't have doubts. She can't have doubts. Did I cut right? You have to be very confident and very comfortable in what you're doing, isn't it? Because a mistake will cost lives.
Right.
Same thing with a lawyer. You're going in front of a judge. You're trying to defend your client, or you're trying to protect whatever you're trying to protect. You can't go in there with doubts. You have to go in there with a certain level of confidence and attitude. Right? So that naturally bleeds over. That confidence that you have within your profession naturally bleeds over into your personal life.
Right.
And what I found is people are awesome. It's just that, once you understand the context of where they're coming from, it naturally, you get it. Right? It's not that they're trying to be mean. They have to be competent. And competence comes, once you're competent, you become confident. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the point. So now coming to us, what I always find is, I find that knowing that you have a strong perspective, you definitely know a number of things, but there are a lot of other things that you can learn as well. Right? That keeps you humble, isn't it? You have to stand for the things. If you believe something is good, you have to go stand for it. Okay? But that should not preclude you from sitting with somebody and having those conversations. Because see, you might seem very arrogant in one space. And then if you don't talk to other people in any other space, of course, the last thing people remember is you were arrogant.
Arrogant, yeah.
Right? But when you were defending, you defend. But then there are still things that you can relate to, talk to, build relationships, build connections.
Yes. Understood.
Isn't it? That
Right.
building those relations, the connections, tempers that arrogance, because then you start realizing how the other person is approaching the problem.
Understood.
Okay. Now, here's a very interesting strategy that I was given by my mentor. Okay. If you're a leader if you're running a team and you want a specific decision made, okay, there's two ways that you can play it. One way that you can play it is you say, I've made this decision, let's do it. The other way is you can say, let's have a meeting, let's discuss what's the best way to do it.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you say, I've made this decision, let's do it, chances are, you made the decision, you're comfortable with it, you can execute. 6 out of 10 times or 7 out of 10 times, it's going to be the correct decision. Okay. But what's the problem? They will say it is Prasad's decision. It's not my decision. Right? So nobody owns that decision. So your team doesn't own it. So at the end of the day, you are fighting it alone. Your team is not a part of the game. Right? Your team may or may not be excited. More often than not, they will not be excited about what they're doing. Now, if you go to the team and you make it a democracy, what happens? Everybody will be involved. But guess what happens? chances of getting the right decision is 4 or 3 out of 10.
Correct. Yeah.
Because good decisions never get made in a democracy.
Right. As
Right?
controversial it sounds, but it is very true in a way.
I mean, that's what because everybody has a different, they're optimizing for different problems. That's what the point is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So now, how do you as a leader do this?
Mm.
Okay. So what my mentor told me was this. He said, listen, if you're a leader, you never go into a meeting
Mm.
for a democracy. You create a perception of democracy.
Right.
Okay. So what that means is you talk to 4 or 5 people ahead of time. Okay. The people that you believe have different perspectives. Okay. Because you may still be wrong 3 or 4 times out of 10. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to the people that you respect the most that will give you a different perspective.
Mm.
Okay. Collect those perspectives on one-on-one meetings. Okay. Come
Right.
up with a solution that is agreeable, that works from those different perspectives. Okay. Then start seeding your team with those ideas. When you go into the meeting room, everybody is seeded. They know, and then when finally the solution comes, because you've been talking about it for so long, naturally the solution tends to the same space.
Right.
Now everybody believes this is my solution and everybody is moving, and you've also mitigated your risk while taking into consideration the team's feedback.
Mhm. Got it, sir.
Right? Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Chalo then. If there's nothing else, see you guys next week. Have fun.
Bye, Prasad.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye bye everyone.
Bye. Happy weekend.